In progress.
Good afternoon and welcome to the NARALO and ISOC-New York Universal Acceptance Day number 2, broadcasting here from the beautiful Chrysler building, not high atop the Chrysler building, only the 12th floor, but it's still beautiful. I am looking forward to this year's presentation and program very much. 1 year on, we're going beyond universal acceptance awareness and into readiness and technical issues and policy and community development and other more interesting issues than just you don't know what this is, but when we're done you will. We'll have a little bit of that, of course. So since we're starting a little bit late and I don't want us to end up chasing the agenda for the next several hours, I'm going to go without further ado to our first speaker, Naela Sarras. So Naela, take it away.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, NARALO and ISOC-New York for hosting this again this year. I'm really thankful to be joining this session. I was in last year's session, and it's nice to see the development in this year's session and the topics discussed. My day job, I work at ICANN. I am the Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement for the North America region. So I have the privilege of working with NARALO on a regular basis. And I'm really happy to be here for this session. So let me go ahead and share my screen for the presentation. Okay, so I'm giving the intro piece in today's webinar, and I'll kind of touch on some of the topics that Greg mentioned, with the understanding that the speakers following me will expand a lot more on these topics. Okay, so starting with where we live and the state of the world that we live in right now, from a linguistic point of view. It's no secret that we live in a diverse world with multi-languages spoken. This table here gives us kind of a rundown of some of the popular languages around the world, popular by the fact that millions, if not billions of people speak them, use them. And surprisingly, English is not a dominant one, right? English sits at 373 million of the billions of people listed here on this table. Yet, when you look at content of materials and content on the internet, 57% of that English represents 57% of that content available in the internet. This has historical reasons for how the internet and cyberspace developed, but that is not necessarily something that is staying the same. In fact, it is slowly changing. And changing for the better to create more inclusivity. And in speaking of inclusivity, we also acknowledge that multilingualism is really key to digital inclusion. And not just really digital inclusion, but we're talking here about meaningful digital inclusion. So linguistic diversity has been a key principle for many organizations, intergovernmental organizations like ICANN, that are focusing on internationalization of domain names and email addresses to help close that digital divide. Now, digital divide touches on many, many aspects, right? There's access to being online and several other aspects. But when we're talking about digital divide here in this ecosystem, we're talking about access, domain names and email addresses, and accessibility to those. I talked about several organizations that have been emphasizing multilingualism. UNESCO is another one of those organizations as well. In this map here, they give us a very good demonstration of languages and scripts spoken around the world or used around the world. And again, not surprisingly, English is not a dominant one here as well either. I grew up in the green part of the world. I grew up writing right to left, and And so I am one of those people that are having to switch, right, my keyboard, right to left versus left to right, depending on what I'm writing. And many other people have similar other issues when they're trying to use the internet in order to access it locally and have it express what they need. So when we're talking about multilingualism, internet, domain names, how are we tying this back to ICANN? With those introductory slides, I need to tie this back to ICANN. I don't know why we're talking about this here at ICANN. So we're talking about what we call the unique identifiers that form the basis of a domain name or of a name. The domain name, for example, in this case here, we're giving an example of wikipedia.org as a domain name. That domain name has a unique number that is associated with, called an IP address, Internet Protocol address. Both these, the domain name itself and the number, work together to allow the user to navigate the internet. ICANN, in this case, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, helps coordinate these unique identifiers across the world. ICANN's mission is to help make sure that these unique identifiers ensure a stable, secure, and unified global internet. So we're talking about unique names and numbers, and that's at the core of where ICANN works. ICANN allocates, and we'll talk about these a little bit later, the top-level domains. In this case, .org is the top-level domain, and allocates them to operators around the world that operate them. And then ICANN also allocates the IP addresses to the regional internet registries, and then they in turn allocate them further down to their stakeholders as well. So that's the core of where we're talking about here, where ICANN's role sits. In terms of evolution, one of the unique identifiers that we are talking about here is, as I said earlier, is the top-level domains. Up until about 2009 or 10, when we looked at the domain name space at the top level, this is the label that comes right after the last dot in a domain name. So we had about 20 of what we call the generic top-level domains. So this is the .com, the .org, info, and then about 200, in the 200 range of country code top-level domains. And that's where the space sat for a long time, right? So the country code top-level domains represented country codes, and then about 20 or so of the generic top-level domains. With the expansion of the domain name space, around 2012 was the last round of the what we call the new GTLD round. That generic top-level domain space opened up to include about 1,200 of new ones that entered the space in the last 10 to 12 years. And many names became top-level domains. So here we give example of photography, .London, and then also there were internationalized domain names that were introduced. So names that are expressed in other languages or scripts, such as Chinese or Arabic or Russian, so using different scripts. And we'll continue. There's the ICANN community is still currently talking about the next round, and therefore including and introducing even more domains into the root zone. I said about 12 to 15 years ago, because I wanted to go back, is when this domain name space started to expand, because I wanted to go back to the days when the country code top-level domains were the first ones to go to internationalized domain names. And so the priority, if you will, was to work on introducing internationalized domain names as country code top-level domains. And that's in 2009, 10, 11, 12, a number of those started going into the root zone. And they are representing country names in the language or script used by that country. This slide is talking about 62 of those strings, 62 CC country code top level domains for 43, representing 43 country names. The reason why it's not one-to-one correlation, as we have on the ASCII side, is that some countries qualify for more than one because they have more than one official language or script in their country. A very good example of that, if you look in that long column in the middle, is India. India has 20 plus official languages and qualified for several strings to represent the name India in the different languages used in India. And so you see this map here, the country code top level domains qualified countries whose language or script is not based on ASCII or on the Latin script. And that's why the majority of what you're seeing here, in fact, all of the country names that you're seeing here are not ones that are representing country names whose name is based on Latin. For example, Spain, does not get España with the NE in this round, right? Because the policy prioritized country codes whose language or script is not Latin-based. At the same time, I said the 2012 round of the next round, in addition to introducing about 1,200 top-level domains into the root zone, and many of those were Latin ones, it also introduced at this time, in this round, now the priority also came to generic top-level domains, and they received also internationalized domain names. So you might recognize some of the ones here. You've got Moscow in Russian, you've got Shabaka in Arabic. I don't know, I can't read many of those, but several ones in Chinese, in Russian, in Thai, in Arabic, introducing many different top-level, in Hebrew, introducing many new top-level domains that are also internationalized domain names. And there's about 90 of them that are delegated in the root zone today. Also internationalized domain names. So you might recognize some of the ones here. I'm hearing myself back, Jolie. Shabaka in Arabic, I don't know, I can't read many of those, but several ones in Chinese, in Russian, in Thai, in Arabic, many different top-level. Can you hear me? I'm hearing a recording playback.
It's Sylvia is the culprit. I've muted her.
Oh, okay.
Naela, this is a good opportunity to grade yourself.
To hear myself speak,
but it's well done. Thank you. Well done.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So thank you. So now at the same time, the policy level introduced new top-level domains in the root zone. The technical level also evolved, and now we have work that has been done by the technical community to include also internationalized email addresses. Initially, email addresses did not support local languages or scripts. So therefore, email address internationalization came about to address this issue and allow email addresses, the addresses themselves, to be expressed in different languages or scripts. But this is important to talk about here. When I'm talking about email address internationalization, I am not talking about the content of the email. I'm actually talking about the string that represents the email address itself. Okay. Now we go. Me too. All right, it's letting me do. Okay, so I talked about internationalized domain names and email address, internationalized email addresses. Here we list some examples of internationalized domain names in different languages and in different scripts. I will draw your attention to the fact that some of those are not always left to right? So Hebrew and Arabic in this case, we have an Arabic example at number 6. Your top level domain is showing up. It's actually what is following the most immediately after the number 6. This is the top level domain for Mauritania in Arabic. All these, I believe, are active and live domain names, so you can test them at your leisure if you want. The same thing applies here for internationalized email addresses, where we list different email addresses, and these are fully internationalized email addresses as well here. And again, some are again using the right to left scripts as well. So then, with we're at this point here where we have the belief that internationalization is good, and different organizations calling for more work and for internationalization and inclusivity and digital inclusion. We've got the policy work that introduced policies to allow top-level domains to internationalized domain names to exist, internationalized email addresses to exist. And we have the technical work working, to make that inclusion also possible. So then, where is the challenge? The challenge is with the development of these domain names to have more names included, including ones in languages and scripts other than English. This challenge, the challenge is to make sure that those unique identifiers that we talked about earlier are recognized and used by different applications, and hence what we refer to as universal acceptance. In this slide here, we're showing an example of an email address that is attempted to be used here in this form, but the form is rejecting the email address, as you can see, as a not valid email address. This email address has several things going for it, right? It's in Arabic, it's right to left. And it's a top-level domain that is, a newer top-level domain. So it has a number of issues going for it. But please don't let that make you believe that this is really an issue that is unique to internationalized domain names only. This also impacts, and I think we will hear that from other speakers and some that have had personal experience with this. This also impacts domain names that are in ASCII or based on the Latin script as well. And so universal acceptance includes all of those issues, whether they are internationalized or not. And so with that, we talk about digital inclusion. It's easy to look at these issues and perhaps think of them as, this is a challenge, but we're also talking about an opportunity and not necessarily just a barrier. Current numbers from ITU put the number of internet users at around 5.4 billion users around the world, representing about 67% of the world population. So this leaves us with billions more that will come online. And per the chart that you're seeing here, these billions will come from countries and territories that are not, whose language or script is not based on Latin. So you can, based on this map, can conclude that the next billion will come from a combination of Africa, Asia Pacific, Arab states, right? Ones where the maturity of that saturation level isn't as high. Okay. And as we talk about that, then we talk about working towards a multilingual internet, which continues to be emphasized by intergovernmental organizations. Here we're citing the WSIS plus 10 outcome documents happening around 2014-15, where they emphasize several things to work on, to work towards multilingualization of information and communication technologies, supporting and encouraging stakeholders in their respective roles and responsibilities to work together to create a linguistic diversity in cyberspace. And no, I didn't skip the slide. Okay, sorry. And so that commitment, again, from international organizations towards multilingual, a multilingual internet. And therefore, that's what brings us to today's topic of universal acceptance. So up until now, we talked about the different developments to create these domains and make them live and usable. So what needs to happen now is that universal acceptance needs we need to work on universal acceptance to allow for these domains to work, for the checks used by the many software applications to validate those domain names to actually work. Some of these applications might be outdated because they were not updated to include all the new domains that are going into the root zone and in the domain namespace that are internationalized. In addition, not all online portals are primed for the opening of a user account, as we saw in the example a few slides back where an email address was rejected. And consideration of technical compliance and best practices. UA, Universal Acceptance, looks to solve some of these issues by ensuring that all domain names, email addresses, regardless of the script that they are expressed in, or the length and number of characters that they are represent, are all universally and equally accepted on the internet. And universal acceptance, as I said earlier, it's not just an issue for a certain part of the world or for a certain script or for a certain community. It's really a global issue that also has a global impact. So having domain names and email addresses that work with all software applications is the goal of universal acceptance. And the impact of that is that having consumers that have a choice to use a domain name in their own of their own choice and be assured that it works, whether it's a longer label, whether it's expressed in a different script, that we all can rely on a favorable user experience that we can that we can assure each other that will be the outcome of using those domain names. Here's some more examples of these domain names when we talk about them. And as I said several times now, this is not an internationalized domain name only. The first couple of examples we give here are in ASCII. When we talk about ASCII, this is really, we're talking about the letters A through Z, thinking of the Latin script, A through Z, uppercase and lowercase, and then numbers 0 through 9. So the first two examples are still in ASCII. .sky is one of the, in the first example, is one of the newer domain names. And so that could be a recognition issue that it might not be working only because even though it's only 3 letters, it's because it's a newer domain name. The engineering, in the second example, the engineering is one where the label is a little longer. So it's still fully in ASCII and a well-recognized word, but the length of it, some applications might have been built on the fact that, and if it's not 2 or 3 letters, then discard it as not a valid domain name. The third example, I believe this is in Thai, but if it's not, please forgive me, is a fully internationalized name here with the names before and after the dot. And I believe somebody in a later presentation will talk a little bit about what Unicode means here and a translation between the Unicode label and the ASCII label. The second set of examples is actual internationalized email addresses. Again, the first one, in international email addresses, the reason why we're referring to this one as a Unicode versus the ASCII label is because we have some diacritics in the first example. So that makes it a Unicode label. The second one is a mix between Chinese script and ASCII. That's also considered a Unicode. The third one is a full is a fully localized email address. And the fourth example is an Arabic email address, so it's going right to left. Okay, so, and I know this, what do we need to know what do we need to do to make that sure that all applications are ready to use internationalized email addresses? And I think one of the speakers will speak elaborate more on this later. So I will just quickly discuss this, is that as developers, as users, as implementers, we have several things to check for or to ensure when using email addresses. We need to make sure that the input, the accepting part happens in our input as characters is accepted, that it's actually validated as correct and recognizable, that it's processed correctly through the system, that it's also stored correctly. So you get the input in, but that it's also stored correctly. And not only is it stored correctly, but also when you retrieve it from the database, that it's actually displayed correctly as well. Okay. Sorry, my screen is covered. So why does UA, universal acceptance, matter? It matters for many reasons. It matters for digital equity and equality, as we talked about earlier. It supports a diverse and multilingual internet. It enables that consumer choice and competition. It creates business opportunities, right? It offers career advantages for developers and system administrators, so more things to learn and more things to offer as skills. And it assists governments and policymakers in reaching their citizens. When we go around the world, especially during ICANN meetings, we get lots of examples where we hear about governments that really truly use Facebook to reach their citizens, to announce things, to draw their attention to certain events, to certain forms. And we even get examples of where the script is not rendering correctly. And so we're asked to, work with implementers about why Facebook in this case isn't, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on a certain product. But the idea is that, it may be, these are products that are used to communicate and they need to communicate correctly. And we talked about the ITU, International Telecommunication Union, several times. In the recent resolution 133 around 2022, they again emphasized the role and the focus on internationalization or a multilingual internet and domain names. They emphasized the need for that to happen. They recognized the different roles that different players in the ecosystems have to make that happen. And they invited member states and sector states to consider how to further promote that universal acceptance and adoption of IDNs, international domain names, to collaborate and coordinate. Okay, so then, so working towards universal acceptance and working together on that, in addition to the work going on around the world by other organizations, ICANN and the ICANN community are also working on universal acceptance. Specifically, universal acceptance readiness globally, and including its work with the Universal Acceptance Steering Group. This is a group it's a community-run initiative. Lots of people around the world are involved in this Universal Acceptance Steering Group, all volunteers. They're really putting in a lot of hours and a lot of time in figuring out different aspects of this issue. And they have different work streams and dedicating time to figuring out some of these issues. So we really recommend you, and I think this is included at the end in terms of links, to go to the UASG website. There's a wealth of resources there and papers to learn from. And then some of the work that the UA Readiness focuses on is organizing outreach and awareness, doing studies on some of the applications, to identify where the technical gaps exist, working on solutions with the technical community to find out what best solutions are, submitting bug reports where necessary, and where there's enough research observed where the relevant tools are not handling the domain names correctly, conducting training, and then also developing curriculum and recommendations for IT programs. Okay. And as we think about universal acceptance, and as we think about this as an issue that is not for a certain community or a certain part of the world to fix, we all really have a role in helping this make happen. Businesses, in this case, we start out with business. Business has a role because, and the way this is expressed is fairly bluntly saying, by business not picking up on this, they are leaving money on the table. But really, it's a business opportunity, as we said earlier. In a study from the Universal Acceptance Steering Group conducted around 2017, they estimated that universal acceptance is an industry that's at around almost $10 billion opportunity. And they think that this is still a very conservative estimate. So it's a business opportunity. It's also an opportunity for governments to think about. Governments want to be able to communicate with their people. They want to be able to reach out to their citizens. And so it is, and governments have a role here in that governments can, it could also work top down, right? So governments can mandate universal acceptance in their procurements, for example. So there's a role for governments as well. There's a role for civil society to encourage the community that you work in and to attend and be involved in universal acceptance issues, to make sure that your systems are ready to start with, and then to promote the research and inclusion of universal acceptance to reinforce the principles. Academia, we talked about earlier about developing curriculum, for example. Academia also has a role in universal acceptance in providing up-to-date curricula. That includes UA principles, training faculty and future students that will become, the future workforce on universal acceptance, and creating awareness around those issues as well. The technical community has always been there, will always be involved in that. The technical community is both developing solutions and training and education on universal acceptance, and handling some of these reported, here we're calling them bugs, in where some of the products are not handling domain names correctly or email addresses. The DNS industry was really, if anyone is going to address it, it needs to be the DNS industry, especially as we talk about, more expansion of the domain name space. So being aware of the business, of your business, of your needs, of what your registrants need to do in order to capitalize and fully use those domain names, etc. And as end users, as domain holders and registrants, check with your ISP, your local internet service provider. Are they UA ready? If they're not, what are their plans to become UA ready? Vote with your money, basically, to make sure that these issues are handled. And as we talk about this, we talked about a role for everyone in the ecosystem to make this happen. And this couldn't be more important, especially as we talk about the next round and the opportunity right now we're talking about a next round opening around second quarter of 2026, so about 2 years from now. As more of these domain names enter the domain name space, we need to have universal acceptance be a principle that is always applied. I've heard it called universal acceptance by design. And so as we implement systems, as we update systems, as we purchase systems, they need to be ready and ready to go for all domain names. So I said earlier, there will be links for how to be involved in universal acceptance. There's a number of links here, email addresses to email if you have questions. Important addresses here is the uasg.tech website. Lots of good information is available there to look up, and several other links here as well. And I can't leave without telling you about further engagement in ICANN. The fellowship and next gen programs. Those programs are designed to help promote newcomers into ICANN. The fellowship program is to strengthen the diversity and multi-stakeholder model by fostering opportunities for individuals from underserved and underrepresented communities to become active in the ICANN community. There's a link here to the ICANN fellowship pages to review. And then a more niche program is the ICANN Next Gen. This is focused at a certain age group to draw into ICANN to start building the next generation of ICANNers. And with that, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. I'll stop sharing. Over to you, Greg.
Naela, thank you very much. Appreciate that thorough overview of the universal acceptance landscape. I should mention that Naela is currently the Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement for North America at ICANN, and that Naela has been working at ICANN for almost 19 years, almost as old as ICANN itself, and has spent much of that time in the IANA function, the only part of ICANN that's actually completely necessary, in my view. Without it, the internet just doesn't work at all. Nonetheless, very, very helpful, and happy that you were let out of the IANA cage and got to join us in policy and stakeholder engagement. So that's lots of fun. Without further ado, introduce our next speaker, Nabil Ben-Ammar. Nabil is a professor of computer sciences at Moulay Ismail University in Meknes, Morocco, also at Al Akhawayn University in Ifrani, Morocco. Currently, he is the vice chair of the Universal Acceptance Steering Group, which is one of the reasons he is here. And he's the chair of the UASG Measurement Working Group. Is an expert on IPv6 and conducts IPv training internationally. He's involved with ISOC and IGF and ICANN, so he's hitting all the I's, at least those for the civil society and private stakeholders and academia. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone and the screen sharing over to Nabil Ben-Ammar. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I hope that I deserve these nice words. Thank you. So let me just be able to share. So it still hosts disabled participants screen sharing.
Second.
If you can give me...
Yeah, just hang on.
Sure.
Okay, you should be good now.
Okay, very good.
And you may want to turn your camera on as well.
So,
There you are.
so thank you very much for having me. So, let me do this first. So can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you may
We-
want to go to the slideshow view.
Go slideshow view.
Okay, with the comments, can you see the comments or without comments?
We see all the other slides. We don't see the slide share view.
Okay. Okay. So again, thank you very much for having me in this nice panel. I'm glad to be with you and to meet with you again. I have seen some faces we have met in different ICANN meetings. And today we will talk more about universal acceptance. So my name is Nabil Benamar from Morocco, and I'm the USG Vice Chair, and also the USG Measurement Working Group Chair. So Naela talked about the definition of universal acceptance, the categories impacted, and many things that I don't need to be redundant in this or to repeat ourselves. So I will go to some just some details here. The vision and the impact also has been or have been defined by and presented nicely by Naela. Just to give you just an idea about the USG, the USG is a team that is supported by ICANN, and they are working on enabling and assessing the current level of readiness of software and applications. So this is Universal Acceptance Steering Group. It has a leadership team. So with the chair and 3 vice chairs, but one of them has just dropped from the leadership because of some personal issues. So now we have only 1 chair and 2 chairs, 2 vice chairs, and different working groups, definitely. So Naela also gave examples of categories affected by universal acceptance. So for the domain names, we have the new short, we have the new long, and we have the IDNs, international domain names. For email addresses, we have different categories. We have the ASCII, where you have everything is in ASCII, like the first example here, but with a new long TLD. The second one is in ASCII, but we have accent, société in French. So in the previous presentation, one of the attendees dropped a comment that société is still ASCII. Yeah, but accent are not accepted in the ID in the DNS, and still not accepted in the emails in general. So this is why it's important, for example, to conduct this kind of workshop and events for the for communities using, for example, French or Spanish or any other language that is based on the Latin script, but they are using other characters, specific characters or accents in general. This is also an issue that they need to, they are interested in fixing this issue or to see what are the solutions being developed. And you have also the Unicode at ASCII and Unicode at IDN, and you have the Unicode at IDN with the right to left script, like in Arabic and in other languages. So the thing here is that majority or all of the existing software are configured that everything is written by default from left to right. So anything that will be introduced or entered by the user will be definitely displayed from left to right. However, Arabic, for example, is written and displayed from from right to left. We still have this issue in many software applications. So making applications UA-ready means that they support all valid domain names and email addresses. They should accept, validate, process, store, and display. Accept means that the user can input the characters, can enter the characters from their local scripts. Validate means that the software accepts these characters. Process means that the software can perform operations on these characters that are non-Latin scripts. Store in a database without any problem, without breaking, without corrupting. And display means that it should be displayed correctly. Here we remind you about the issue of right to left, for example. So my presentation will focus on what we are exactly doing in the USG, and especially in the measurement working group, where we can show you some gap analysis about existing software. So the technology stack for UA consideration is like this. For example, applications and websites. We are conducting every year or 2 years the top 2000 websites and their level of readiness. This is one of them: Wikipedia, ICANN.org, Amazon, and others. Some main applications that are widely used, like PowerPoint, Google Doc, etc. Social media and search engine, programming languages like Python, Java, just some leading ones, but we have also statistics about other ones. Platforms, operating system, and system tools. Here you can see that we are making the difference between mobile OS, mobile operating system, and desktop operating system, so that we can tackle both of the categories. And this is because one application might work well on a smartphone, which means a mobile operating system, and gives a different behavior when it comes to the desktop one. We are also tackling the standardizations, or the standards and best practices that are being published, like the ITF RFCs, like the Unicode document, etc. This is one of the challenges that also Naela in her presentation mentioned. For example, a user can fill a form, and in the email address form, it can enter his or her email address in the Arabic script, and automatically he will get an error that this is not a valid email address. This is something that can be implemented just by a JavaScript program that can run locally in the application from the client side, and just to mention that this is not correct, like we are doing, for example, for an email address without the at, or for a phone number with something not digits. So automatically it will detect that this is an issue, and it's not accepted. This is a frustration experience for the user, because he will see that he is excluded from participating in this experience. This is test. This is our statistics about the email servers and the support across email servers. So just to measure how widely email addresses, international email addresses, are accepted, we are conducting some quarterly surveys of email servers across domain names, registered in hundreds of top-level domains regularly, and the results show that we are less than 25% of readiness. For websites, acceptance by website here, for example, for international email addresses in websites, but depending on the these categories, you can see that, for example, the main ones that we are looking for, like Unicode, those that are based on IDN or Unicode, are just below 40%, and Unicode and rough right to left addresses are below 10% for readiness. But we can see also that for ASCII, new short or new long, we are not yet in the 100% of readiness, meaning that some applications are not well configured to accept or to recognize the new long or new short top level domains. So this is something that is related to the reports that we are publishing. So for those interested in more details about this, you can just go to USG website, and you will see different reports that we are publishing regularly. One of the categories of software we are assessing is the content management system. For this, the UA readiness of CMS, namely one of the most used one, or largely used, widely used, like WordPress and its associated plugins and their multiple extensions, have been tested with different set of email addresses and domain names, and we have seen that domain names in most cases, IDN generally worked well for end-to-end, but failed some tests. So this is what we can say as A label. A label is stored instead of U label in the database. So A label means that's how the application is using the label and processing this label, but the U label means that how the user is using and writing and entering this label. For example, in the IDN part, you can type a non-Latin an IDN, non-Latin based on non-Latin script. So this is the user who is entering this IDN, but the DNS or the application will convert this to ASCII and use X and dash dash to make it as an IDN to be sent to the DNS server. So this is the A label, and the other one is the U label. For emails, while various categories of ASCII email addresses work well in WordPress, it's not AI compatible, meaning that it cannot be processed, it cannot be it's not level 1 or level 2. So we will discuss this concept of level 1 or silver level and gold level later on the coming slides. Here are also some examples for different categories of content management systems with different plugin. We see in the third column the level of readiness. The A level means that all tests passed with success. So for A label, we have no one here in this category. B level means that end-to-end works, but some tests failed. And the C level means that end-to-end testing is not working. So here also we can see that there is much work to do, at least to eliminate this C level and to make some of the B level becoming A level. For email, the acceptance of email by this content management system, we can see that some of them are A level. A level meaning that all tests passed with success. But this is something for ASCII at ASCII.ASCII, which means that this is the classical ones. For IDNs also, we have for WordPress, for example, we have some successful stories here. So this is a level for the ASCII at IDN.IDN. But in other categories, it's still C level. But so we are in 50-50 here in this category for CMS. Identity platform and web hosting tools. And so anytime that we ask a contractor to do a study for us, we prepare a statement of work where we are defining the guidelines so that the contractor is not totally free on choosing and picking the solutions and the platform and the software that he or she wants to deploy, but we are guiding the contractor for this, meaning that, for example, we are imposing to choose different categories from open source, from commercial, from software, from so, and also from different environment like desktop and mobile platforms. So here we have two commercial ones like Okta and Auth0, and we have open IAM. And here we can see that, for example, we have different results. The best one is Auth0 with 100% of readiness. For the popular web hosting tools, we wanted to determine to what extent web hosting tools like cPanel, Plesk, and ISP-config offer the capacity for customers to build websites and host email addresses without any problem, especially for universal acceptance. And here, once again, one might argue why exactly these three software. So based on the statistics that we found and based on the recommendation that we did in the statement of work, the contractor picked these ones that fit what we want to reflect in the report. And the results are that none of the web hosting tools are in compliance. Plesk has the highest chance for providing a full native script experience, and ISP-config has the advantage of being open source and allows making ad hoc changes. So when we have an open source software, it means that it's easier for us from the USG to approach the community and the team that is working there to ask them what is the issue, how we can work together to implement and to improve the software so that it can be UA compliant. So that's the major advantage of open source in this case. The test results, the overall test scenario here that we have, as you can see, the majority is in F, meaning that the test failed, and some of them passed the first assessment after additional steps. Okay, so here with different, as you can see, for different categories in the columns, we can see the operating system, the environment that is used. Although we are talking about, for example, Linux, but we have different distributions, so that we can see if all distributions are working well or it's not the case. For browsers and social media platforms, we looked at the UA readiness for browsers in the desktop and mobile platform. The general outlook for the UA readiness of modern web browser is largely positive on desktop platform. It's not always the case in the mobile environments. One improvement that we can ask for is handling of bookmarking of IDNs. A number of vendors listed previously stored bookmarks using panic-code conversions, which have little or no significance to the reader. Here are some main browsers and in different platforms, different operating system. And we can see that there is a green there, meaning that we have some successful browsers with the light green here. With Edge in this case, for example, in different operating system, for example, on Windows, on macOS, on Android, but it's not the case in Linux because Edge doesn't exist in Linux. So here is a comparison between the desktop and mobile environment, where we can see that it's not always the case. It's not similar because the implementation is different, and more difficulties when it comes to mobile device environments. Most failure were due to the following test. Confirm that the URL display is in the correct format as added, and confirm that the URL is displayed correctly in the bar. For example, with the characters are correct, and also the direction from left to right or right to left. For social media platforms, also UA readiness was tested, and registration and authentication of email addresses with chosen social media platform, changing the user's email address attached to the profile, posting content with various categories of domain names. And we have seen that there is strong support for display and navigation for international email addresses and domains across most social media platforms. But we can, as we will see later on, all these social media platforms are not ready to enable the user or to give access to the user to create an account with an AI address. So no social media supports registration using a non-ASCII email address. And this is why you have only red in this slide. Some other tests here we can see, for example, Telegram scored highest with LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter coming in second and third. These are the latest results we have, but generally we want to do further tests to see what is the updated or the updates regarding this. For example, YouTube here only supports Gmail addresses, but we have not been able to test all of them to see if it's okay or not. Okay. For programming languages, we have some good results. For example, we have, for example, to sum up these parts, we can say that, for example, for Python and Java, they are nearly between 90 and 95% UA ready. Because of the libraries we have, because of the community behind, especially when it comes to Python. But generally, both of them are now good candidates, good examples of programming languages when it comes to UA readiness. Also, as I mentioned, this is something that we are testing in different platforms, different environments, and we don't have always the same results, especially when it comes to the mobile environment. The UA readiness is less compared to the desktop one. In other frameworks, as you can see, for example, that if we pick the example of PHP, it can be seen as UA ready, especially in Windows and Linux. So here also we have some programming languages solutions where we are mentioning the libraries that's been used, and some code examples and samples can be found in GitHub to have more idea about the level of readiness. And in the USG, some training materials have been developed to guide the users and the attendees on how we can test these programming languages. For email specific system, here we need to mention that we are generally considering level 1 and level 2. Level 1 means that if the tool can only send and receive from an AAI address, and level 2 means that the user can create, or the tool can give the user the possibility to create an account and with a non-Latin script. So all of the major email providers are still not level 2. Let's take just the example of Gmail or Microsoft. These are not level 2. They are level 1, meaning that you can send an email to Gmail and an AI from an AI address. You can also receive the email from an AI address if you have a Gmail account. Same thing for Microsoft, but still you cannot fully experience this UA readiness by creating a new account in non-Latin scripts. How we can summarize this part also is just by reminding that in the process of the email, by sending an email, we have different servers, different type of software, like the mail user agent, like the mail transfer agent, and the mail delivery agent. We have different protocols being involved, whether we are sending or checking the inbox. So all of this software should be UA ready to say or to have to reach the goal of being able to send or receive the email. So if one of the components of this chain is not UA ready, we are failing the test. Here is a summary of the tools that we have tested, and we can see that some of them are UA ready. So these are the tools, but the providers, it's another story. The providers here, if Gmail is now able to give us the possibility to create an AI account, I think that would be a major change in universal acceptance. For spam filters, the UA readiness test determined how well the chosen software packages and the spam filters support this AI principle. So we can see that there is plenty of work to do. It's still improving year by year. In the USG, we have developed an AI readiness self-certification guide. The objective was to increase the AI adoption, define a product category for AI supporting email systems, tools, and utilities. And this is something that we have in the USG website, and we have also in the USG website a tool where the user can just enter his or her email address, and he can get the result of if the email server is UA ready or not. We have defined the silver, gold, and platinum, as I mentioned earlier. We have also here rating of the system based on rating of components. Finally, we have tackled in the USG recently the UA curriculum. This is mainly because we believe that any change should come from the university. So if we are developing the technology, trying to make the technology ready, etc., who will use this technology? If we are not preparing the next students and next engineers to be aware of the universal acceptance principle, and that this is something that is doable, that we can configure, that we can have UA in all computer science based or related applications. Finally, we will end up with something that is not widely used. So because of this, we have developed some courses for the academia. This is what we call micro modules that can be implemented in the current curricula, just like a patch, just to add or to mention a chapter or two that add this flavor, this something that is related to universal acceptance, so that we are preparing the user, we are preparing the student for this in different categories, as you can see, from basic programming, from advanced programming, for databases, data analysis, security, networking, the configuration of network services, etc. And this is something also that has been, I think, presented by Naela. So I will stop here. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Nabil, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. So far, been very interesting. We now have on the schedule a brief break. We're a little behind schedule, but if we can, let's resume at 4:30 EDT. So it's about a 6-minute break. Well, maybe I'll give you 8 minutes, but let's try to be back at 4:30. In the meantime, stretch your legs and pray for universal acceptance. We will now adjourn for 6 minutes. Oh yeah, no, she's doing good. Yes. Yes, now I know. She's been through the ringer lately. She's off the board. She's jobless, as you say. Thankfully for us at large, she has taken over the co-chair of our policy working group. No. Doesn't even get you a plane ticket. That and $2.75 will get you up on the subway. Yes. We've got a plethora of nominees. Yeah, well, it's, I think Jonathan was hoping to kind of move things along a little bit in terms of fresh blood in ALAC.
Greg, you're not muted on the Zoom call. I don't know if you are.
Greg, I touched screen sharing. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I see. You can bring me up. Yeah, I see your
Did-
screen, and you see on kind of a roller there. Yeah. I don't know if you're able to put it in kind of a slideshow view mode.
Like this, can you see it like this? Is it a slideshow or?
Yeah, it doesn't look like slideshow mode. It looks like a vertical roller.
Okay, so yeah, okay. Let's. Okay, I know. Um, I will share the whole screen, I guess.
Program, did you have that up in, Julian?
Okay, is that better?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay, great.
I will give a 2-minute warning now. And I'll hold us to it. Thank you. Hello and welcome back for the second half of our Universal Acceptance Day presentation. We're going to get right into it. Our first presenter in this half is Julien Bernard. Julien, I'll just let you take it away.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Thank you for the invite. I'm an IT consultant working for COFOMO, a Canadian organization. I'm here as a technical expert in universal acceptance topics. I worked on several studies for the USG group. I'm also on a related topic, a maintainer on the Algera toolset. And I'm also in the Inuktitut generation panel, which is Inuktitut is a native language in Canada. So I will do a presentation on technical aspects of universal acceptance. It will be an introduction, so nothing too complicated and too technical here. And so first you will see a few slides we saw in the previous presentation, so I will go quickly on those, and then we will get some technical aspects behind the concept of universal acceptance. So as a reminder, the goal of universal acceptance is to get all domain names, email address to work in all software applications. For the impact, I have a practical example because I think it speaks to people when you have examples in real life. An example that allows promoting consumer choice and improving competition. So the Swiss domain name requires people to have a legally registered organization in Switzerland to register a domain. So when you buy from a Swiss website, .Swiss website, you know for sure that it's an organization that is registered in Switzerland. So this is how those TLDs, those new TLDs, and it's not even IDN TLD here, but those TLDs are useful and can improve competition. And you obviously have other examples with governments that can reach out to citizens with their own language. So we use this slide, so I have nothing to add except that Nabil, you said that someone said that Société is ASCII, but it's an extended ASCII. So yeah, it's ASCII but extended one, and domain names were on the first ASCII set. And you also saw this one. In the technical perspective, what you can see with this slide is that you need to ensure all parts of your software will be compliant. So that means you need to look through all the total part of your software. If you have a backend, if you have a front end, if you are using some applications, database, everything needs to be compliant here. And you can see that here as well, all part of the stack, technology stack, is involved in universal acceptance. And something that I think is missing here is the database. You need a database that will support Unicode if you want to be UA compliant here. When it goes to email addresses, there is another challenge. You need to be compliant, but the entire chain of client and servers need to be compliant. So if you send an email and on the path to your destination, some server is not compliant, your email will be rejected. So this is another challenge you have when dealing with internationalized email address. And these are examples of client and servers you may have. So you may have a user agent like Outlook, Thunderbird, or Gmail, some part of Gmail, a contact form on a web server. So that means you may have an internationalized email address. If the contact form on a web server won't work, you won't be able to use your email address there. Then you have the submission agent and transfer agent, which are a server on the path to your destinations. And among those, you have services provided by Microsoft, Amazon, others, and you also have I have some echo going on. Do you know who is creating? Okay, there's no more echo. Okay, and you also have open source components, so that means anyone on the path could have its own implementation, his own software installed, not something that is so not something that is backed by a big organization. So nothing more here. So now we'll go through some fundamentals to know why we are here and what is behind the scene here. So we'll start with Unicode, and first of all, defining a character. So a character is what will form a string, or what we call also a label. Like in the hello world, you have H is a character. So in technical aspect, it's a unit of information. It is used for the organization, the control, or the representation of textual data. It's not only the representation, the organization and the control. For instance, you have letters, digits, but you may have special characters, diacritics, or also control characters, which are not visible characters, for instance. As an example of control character, you have some character that says this text is right to left, or left to right. You can have this kind of characters that is an indication on how some text should be displayed. Then you have code points. Code points is the value or the position of a character in a character set, in coded character set. So it's a number you assign to represent a character in a specific system. So for instance, in the ASCII system, you have uppercase A, which is 65 decimal. And then you also have the glyph, which is a typographic representation of a character. So it's how you will actually see the character. And this depends on the font. This also depends on, in some of scripts or language, it may depend on something else, like where the character is in the chain in a string. So for Arabic, you may have 4 glyphs for the same character, depending on where your character is in the string. And of course, you may write those characters from right to left or left to right, as we saw previously. So then you have the encoding notion. Character encoding is how you map a character set to the actual code points. And so it's allow you to encode the code points into bytes and to decode them from bytes to code points. And initially, only ASCII existed. It was a 7-bit character, so you only had 128 characters available in the ASCII, in the basic ASCII. That means not that much. You had Latin characters and some punctuations, digits, and that was all you had. Then the extended ASCII came along with one more bit, which allowed having like some diacritics or some other specific characters, but you cannot represent all characters for the humanity with only ASCII. And so other encoding systems were developed, and then the next slide, you have the Unicode standard, which is the one widely used now. So the idea of the Unicode standard is to represent all the characters used in writing. And those characters are organized at the script level. And it's now widely used and offers plenty of space to support current and new characters. So for the Unicode encoding, there are different types of encoding, UTF-8, 16, and 32. The one used in DNS is UTF-8. It has the advantage of being of variable length. So, for instance, an ASCII character will only use 1 byte to be represented because you have a direct mapping between ASCII and UTF and Unicode. But then for other character, you may use 2, 3, or 4 bytes, depending on your script. And for instance, Arabic is 2 bytes, Devanagari is 3 bytes, and Chinese are 4 bytes. So when you read bytes with your computer, you need to specify which character encoding you will be using. So let's say your text is encoded with UTF-8, but you specify UTF-32. In UTF-8, your ASCII character will use 1 byte, but you expect to read 4 bytes for 1 character since you tried to read it with UTF-32. So you won't have what you expect to have here, because instead of reading 1 byte, you will read 4 bytes. So you will read other characters that were independent characters and not meant to be read as part of 1 character only. So that's why encoding and specifying encoding is really important here. And then we have another layer above this, because that was not enough. We have what is called normalization. So you have multiple ways of encoding the same glyphs. For instance, the diacritics can exist with a character or without a character. So in this example, you have the grave accent on the E. That in Unicode, you have a value for the E with this grave accent, which is E8, E8 in hexadecimal. But you also have the E alone and the grave accent alone. And when you combine them together, you will get the same character as the E with grave accent alone. That's why you need what is called normalization. The normalization is a way to transform those combination into a single form that allows to have things normalized behind the scenes. So for DNS, we use the NFC normalization form. That means your E plus grave accent will be used as a single character. So the C is for composed, meaning that you use a single character, and if we were using NFD normalization form, it would be a decomposed form, so 2 characters for E and grave accent. But the NFC is the right choice since it's more efficient. You use only 1 character instead of 2. So when we talk about internationalization domain names and all the domain names, because universal acceptance is not only for international domain names, but all the new domains, long ones, new ones, and IDNs. So you have kind of long, you have some examples here of long domains like google.google.engineering.info. You have new short ones. We don't have those ones here, but info is kind of a short one, but you have 3 characters ones. I don't have some of the recent ones, but there are some of those that may be refused because some software are not compliant with universal acceptance. And what you need to know about those domains that are delegated is that they can change over time. So as a software developer, you should not use a static list of domains. And they actually change pretty often. So you may say, okay, I use a static list and I just will update it often, but no, you won't be UA compliant here. And some things to check when you're a developer, a label is 63 octet, 63 bytes, and the maximum length of a domain is 255 bytes. And when we say a domain is internationalized, that means some part of the domain, so the domain is separated into labels. Those labels are separated by dots. If you have one of the labels that contains a non-ASCII character, and when I say non-ASCII, it's non-base ASCII, not extended. I'm not talking about extended ASCII. So that will avoid confusions like Nabil had. When you have one of those characters, you are using an internationalized domain name. And we saw in the previous slide some issues with email addresses. You need all the servers on the path to support internationalized email address if you want to be able to send an email to someone. For domains, a choice has been made to keep the underlining parts the same and support internationalized domain names on top of that. So DNS servers and all the DNS infrastructure is already ready for this. You only have to change your software. And how they did that is by allowing to transform a label with Unicode character into a label with only ASCII characters. So as a software developer, when you want to implement a universal acceptance into your system, you will have to handle this. That means that the first thing you will have to do is make the normalization of any input you would have as an IDN. And then you check if it's compliant with the RFC defined IDNA 2008. So this is the RFC that defines IDNs in applications. Then you will have to convert your label that is containing Unicode characters into what is called Punycode, which is the representation with only ASCII characters. And for domain names, a prefix was chosen to be added to this Punycode label, which is xn-. So you had the example, for instance, example with a diacritic, which becomes example without the a-xta, which is the Punycode version, and you had xn-. On top of this, and you have your domain, your label represented with only ASCII characters, and you can use this domain on the network, and it will work. So you may say, when should I use the A label or U label of the domain? So on the network, you must use the A label because it's what the network understands. But on your system, it really depends on what you want to do with this. But the most systems should use U labels, because if you have to interact with users, the users want to see the U label form. They want to see the Unicode form. They want to understand the A label form. So for instance, if some users have to search for a label of a domain, they will search with those internationalized characters. They won't search something with Unicode version. I actually implemented some software where I had to let users look for Punycode and Unicode labels, but this is not so. This is for really specific usage. Generally, a user will only use U label. And when it comes to email addresses, so an email address is composed of two parts: the mailbox and the domain name. The domain name is like all the domain. It can be ASCII or an IDN. And the IDN part can be represented as an A label, so the form with only ASCII characters. And this form should be supported by the software that want to implement email address internationalization. And for the mailbox part, it can also be internationalized. And you don't have a way to represent the mailbox part, the mailbox part as only ASCII characters, because the user can choose whatever he wants for the mailbox part. And that's why you need all the servers on the path to support this, because if a server cannot recognize the mailbox name as with Unicode characters, then the servers won't be able to forward the email to the right user. So as I said, you can have your domain as a U label or A label, and both the address with A label and U label are the same, and they must be treated like the same address. Else you will have some security issues. And so when you want to handle EIs, the recommendation is to use A label when you deal with DNS or SMTP at byte level, and ULabel for most of the softwares, because your users will want to see their email with the Unicode form. But you need to ensure that those two forms will be accepted and are treated as the same. So when you send an email to one or the other form, the email goes to the same person in the same mailbox. And that's what I said. So nothing more to say here. So that's it. There are some slides in the conclusion, but you saw those ones with Nabil already. So that's all for me, and I hope we are still on track with the time.
Julian, thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. Very good overview. Digging in a little bit more. Some of the more technical issues, which is what we're doing this year. So now we come to Jonathan Zuck and a less technical presentation. We're going to talk about policy and community outreach and all sorts of things. To keep us on track, I will go directly to Jonathan Zuck after just briefly introducing him. Jonathan has been a long-time participant in ICANN. He is the current chair of the At-Large Advisory Committee, ALAC, of ICANN. Jonathan is a man of many talents, singer, filmmaker, photographer, lobbyist, and nude model. There's, what is it, 3 truths and a lie? In any case, Jonathan, without further ado, and before I say something even dumber, I'm going to pass the microphone over to you, and you can hit me over the head with it.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for that introduction. And I didn't know everybody knew about the modeling career. That's just so long ago. But thanks, everyone. And I'm grateful to be here and talking to you about universal acceptance. I mean, at its core, I think ICANN's credibility is really tied up in the issue of universal acceptance, because if we just continue to add names to the root and nobody's using them, it's a little bit like a tree falling in the forest and no one hearing it. We need to find a way to really wake up the community of programmers and IT managers and others that need to make these changes, so that the promise of the next round about really being more inclusive and more multilingual can be realized. In the absence of universal acceptance, it's a little bit of a waste to create all these new domains. As Greg mentioned, my background is a little bit eclectic. All through the 90s, I was probably writing the code that now needs to be changed to accommodate these new domain names, and because things were pretty early then, and we were trying to figure out how to validate domain names and forms and things like that. So at its root, the problem is very often in client-side JavaScript that was written, 20 years ago to verify an email address on an airline site or something. And so sometimes part of the effort is sort of tracking down where that code is, how it's being used, and how it should be changed going forward. But we've got to reach out to the folks that make those changes and find ways to do it. So as Greg mentioned, my part of the presentation is just a little bit of a discussion about what the rest of us can do. I mean, once you've already got the ear of a programmer and somebody that's building new websites or who's been tasked with updating an old one, then all that information about how to implement URL validation becomes incredibly useful. And the Universal Acceptance Steering Group has done a lot in terms of providing tools and techniques and sample code and things like that to facilitate that. What we want to think about more broadly is, how do we as a community sort of engage on this issue in such a way that the folks that need to hear about it, that need to be motivated to make those changes, are in fact motivated to do so. Let me see if I can advance my slides here. Let's see. So when we talk about policy, there's really kind of two different types of policy possibilities. One is ICANN policy, and I think most of the folks on this call are familiar with what ICANN is and what it does. And if not, we've talked a little bit about it. Naela did in her session at the beginning, sort of the coordinator of the names and numbers. And it has a policy function internally about what the policy should be surrounding domain names. And then there's the notion of government policy. And I think we should look a little bit at both and figure out what it is we might want to do. So on the ICANN policy front, what are things that ICANN could do from a policy perspective to help goose this process and move it along? And it's interesting that these are all very controversial, but I thought I'd bring them up anyway, just to make for a more exciting call. So one of the things is that ICANN has a series of contracts with companies whose job it is to manage the names and numbers. Those are registries and registrars, who in turn have resellers, who in turn have relationships with web hosts, etc. And at this point, not even all of them are completely compliant with universal acceptance. So it seems almost a no-brainer that there ought to be a policy requirement to participate in the next round or something like that. You need to be UA compliant. I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation. So it's something that when we get the chance to get the ear of someone talking about what ICANN's sort of organizational policy might be, one of those is that you're not part of the new round unless you yourself are totally UA compliant as a registry or registrar. Then ICANN also has business contacts. ICANN buys a lot of tickets from United Airlines, for example. I don't think it's completely unreasonable to say that to do some direct encouragement of some of its vendors, law firms, airlines, event vendors, etc., to ask them if they want to continue to do business with ICANN, that they ought to become UA compliant. So there's opportunities for leverage here. And then perhaps the most controversial of all is the next round that's coming up. If you believe, as I do, that the key to a successful calling the next round a success is the success of communities, is the success of the applicant support program, and sort of broadening these domain names to more of the world, to underserved regions, and of course broadening the multilingual aspects of the domain name system, then it makes sense to say that we shouldn't execute that round until the world is ready for it. And I think a lot of folks that might be a little bit complacent about universal acceptance compliance might be less so if it meant holding up the round. So those are some aggressive suggestions that I just wanted to put out there in terms of ICANN policy. But we ought to give them some thought, because I really do believe that some of that ICANN's credibility is really at stake when it comes to throwing new names in the root without the market we're trying to serve, the users we're trying to serve, really being ready. So what does government policy potentially look like? Well, I mean, as Naela, she stole some of my thunder talking about some of the international fora like UNESCO and others that have begun to talk about the importance of not only sort of multilingualism, but also the notion of a multilingual internet in particular, and a multilingual DNS. the ITU plenipotentiary resolution that came out recently actually addressed some of these things specifically and talked about the role of member states in IDNs, including the fact that IDNs contain to some sustainable development goals because it allows for more inclusivity and participation of a broader cross-section of the population of the world into the internet. We need to create technical solutions for multilingualism. That's part of that resolution. Countries need to be part of promoting it. So the same question might be said around the world. Are some of the ITU member states, UNESCO member states, et cetera, should we be encouraging governments to make universal acceptance part of their procurement requirements? Now that's a big lift when it comes to governments, but I mean, I think it's something we might want to start encouraging because we really have, especially the countries that whose languages, first languages are not ASCII or Roman character languages, and that are engaged in trade from outside, should be focused on trying to get the world moving in this direction. So there is opportunities, I think, for even government involvement in universal acceptance. And Naela mentioned some of this and stole some of my thunder in her presentation. But I just wanted to mention some of these things as a possibility. So then the next question then becomes, how do we go about evangelizing the need for universal acceptance? And how do we engage the community in a conversation about universal acceptance? And what are the pathways and channels and strategies that we might use? Obviously, the Universal Acceptance Steering Group has been around for a few years now, and they've been very active in a number of different technical circles and elsewhere to try and get more and more awareness on universal acceptance. But what can we do as a community? What should we be thinking about? Well, one of the things is the session we're on right now, right? I mean, this is a UA Day related session, and so it's starting to become an annual tradition of the Universal Acceptance Steering Group to celebrate a Universal Acceptance Day, which has sort of become a Universal Acceptance Month, in order to really focus the community on promoting universal acceptance, getting folks that might not otherwise thinking about it to learn a little bit about what it takes and what it is that needs doing. There's opportunities for conference participation. Almost every one of us is at one time or another at the dais at some sort of a conference around the world, talking about different aspects of the internet, security, stability, et cetera. And is there a chance in those conferences to make a plug for universal acceptance, again, to increase awareness? Those of us that speak from time to time at technical conferences, in particular, ought to be talking to folks as well. So I'm going to just sort of go through these. I'm getting ahead of my slides here a little bit. So in conferences, they can be technical or they can be non-technical. I mean, CES, comes up annually, and there's again, there's from all over the world that might benefit from learning about universal acceptance. Let's talk to the folks at CES to see if we can get on their calendar for a presentation on universal acceptance. What about conferences on economic development and ones that are related to the Sustainable Development Goals? Should we be bringing universal acceptance into those conversations and stressing the need for multilingualism and multiculturalism in order to really achieve the sustainable goals that we've set? Just some thoughts. Curriculum development is another area, and that's also an area in which the Universal Acceptance Steering Group has really made some serious effort to sort of get people while they're in school and to look at what folks might need as part of their computer science curriculum to learn about universal acceptance. And so again, those of us that work with academic institutions or the folks that are in next gen that are in academic institutions can be part of an effort to try and encourage the incorporation of universal acceptance into the computer science curriculums of those institutions. What are some of the things that those curriculums could include? Introducing basic internationalization, some of the things that we've shown here in this session, in Unicode, IDNs, and EAI. Operationalize the UA use cases. You saw Naela talk about this. the need to ability to accept, store, process, validate, and display these all types of URLs. I wanted to say new ones; they're not new, but the idea that the ones we've gotten since the first 20 that don't fit the original mold, we need to operationalize all the use cases around them, as Naela mentioned at the beginning. Learn to use built-in libraries for processing Unicode and IDNs. Again, a lot of the work the UASG has done is helping to build libraries into these development tools so that the automatic URL validation code is operating with more vigor than the original JavaScript code that we were debating that we created before that said that just needs to be 3 characters from this fixed list. Provide technical knowledge and skills on standards for RFCs and IDNs and EAI, et cetera. This can be part of the curriculum as well. The UASG has developed a full, fleshed out curriculum on this topic. So given that resource exists, what resources do we have in terms of human resources to encourage academic institutions to incorporate that curriculum into their computer science program? And produce test cases and procedures to verify universal acceptance support. At one point I was thinking about trying to get the whole community to start banging on websites with IDNs or non-standard email addresses so that we get a sense and they get a sense that these failures are happening. I made the mistake of convincing my wife to get a .gallery email address, and enormous sites like American Airlines, United Airlines, Bank of America, and others all rejected her email address because of the .gallery name. So it's not like this is some problem that doesn't exist, among some of the larger multinational institutions that we all use. The problem is really widespread and requires, I think, some aggressive, participation from our community. Then there's this notion of public naming and shaming. On the positive side, we might want to launch a Twitter campaign thanking some large website for making the transition to be universally accepting. If there was a large website, a multinational website that was previously not compliant, or maybe it's a national website and we do this on a regional level, and they've made an update, let's make a point to be public about appreciating the effort that they've put in, and in hopes of encouraging others to do the same and to experience that same appreciation. I'll probably get more pushback, on a negative campaign, but that's possible as well. I mean, at some point we might want to reach out to United Airlines or someone else via Twitter and really try to mobilize our community to remind them that how essential this kind of an update is for them and for their customers. The same thing with email. We can identify, and the UASG has in many instances identified the key personnel in the top 100 websites, and we can get the community more engaged in trying to reach out to them, so they're not only just hearing from 1 or 2 people, but from the entire community on this topic. So those were some of the ideas that I had for sort of policy-related activities or community outreach-related activities that we could bring to bear on this topic. And I was supposed to be done by 1:15, Greg, so hopefully I'm close, but if there's questions or ideas or suggestions, I'm happy to hear them.
So far, I think everyone was just enthralled and in rapt attention to your presentation. I don't see any questions, but we'll have a little Q&A at the very end, because this now brings us to our last presenter, which is Mark Svenkarek, or Mark SV for those who can't spell Svenkarek. We'll make Mark a co-host so that he can share his screen. Mark is a member of the Universal Acceptance Steering Group and the chair of the Universal Acceptance EAI Working Group. And Mark will tell you what EAI stands for in just a second, because I'm going to hand over the microphone and the screen to Mark and let him entertain you. Mark, your microphone is on mute.
Of course it is. Yeah. So hi, I'm Mark. Call me Mark SV. It doesn't matter how you say my name. There's 5 ways to pronounce my name. You may know me already. I'm one of the original members of UASG from way back in the day. And I'm going to talk to you today about EAI. So email address internationalization is what EAI stands for. I don't know why it's not IEA or something like that. It's EAI. And internationalized email, you've seen this in some of the earlier presentations, it's not backwards compatible. So unlike things like Punycode or something like that, where you can make something backwards compatible, EAI is not backwards compatible. It requires you to use SMTP UTF-8 instead of SMTP and a couple of other minor things. It's a pretty minor set of changes, but if you don't make them, the email is not going to be accepted. And this has led to a lot of problems that we call the chicken and egg problem. Namely, it's hard to get people to demand something that they don't know about because nobody's offering it, because it's not backwards compatible. It's hard to get people to agree to support it if there's no demand for it because people don't know, so like that. So we've taken a number of approaches over the years to try and resolve this problem. One of them is direct outreach to suppliers. I work at Microsoft. I got Microsoft to offer EAI support to its products and services. We visited QQ and Tencent years ago in Guangzhou, and we convinced them to add EAI support. It was kind of hard to believe that they agreed, even harder to believe that they ultimately did it, but they did it. Various people within the community, like XGen, so Ajay Data's company, has worked with the government of Rajasthan to make sure that these things are supported in government procurement. We have someone in Egypt doing the same. We have someone in Thailand doing the same. We have someone in Sri Lanka attempting the same. So there's a little bit of, we often talk in universal acceptance about using the power of governments and procurements to drive universal acceptance. And sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't work. Like I said, there's a couple of noteworthy examples, but a lot of talk also too. The number of times that I've talked to government officials in India that there's a lot of talk about it. Nobody did it until Dr. Dada in the state of Rajasthan actually cracked the code, right? So an insider actually got it to work, but that's just Rajasthan. India is huge. So there's a limit to that. So we tried to take a new and unique approach, which was to create self-certification and a way for people to publish their scores so that we could promote these things from all directions. People could promote their offerings and say we have a certified level of support. People could say, I only want to acquire things that have a certified level of support. And we could create some sort of a marketplace. That was the idea. And so that was called the self-certification program, which is ongoing and is part of the UASG EAI Working Group 5-year plan. The first part of this, and I put a link in the chat, the first part of this you can see on our wiki page. So do you want me to put up the wiki page on my screen? Sure, why not? Let me see. Hang on a sec. Okay. Can you see my browser window? How's that look? Okay, you can see it. So this wiki page has got a bunch of stuff on here. I'm going to move it over to my other screen. You can see our consolidated 5-year plan, which contains this self-certification program, a self-certification guide. I'll come back to this guide in a second, and just issues with this wiki page in a second, and then something that we call the score generator. So hopefully, if I open this, Greg, can you confirm that you're seeing the certification guide now?
No, I'm seeing PDFs, like your file explorer listing of 4 PDFs and statements.
All right.
You were fine before you said, let me move this to my other screen.
Oh, really? Is that what it was? Oh, I see. Okay. I thought I was on a window and it said I was on a screen.
No, now there we go.
There we go. Okay, so here's a wiki page at this very guessable URL. Here's a bunch of stuff. Self-certification guide. This is supposedly the latest version. It's not. I'll get back to that in a second. So here's the self-certification guide. And what we've done is, I really want to, hang on a second. My apologies. I don't want to be looking sideways. So share, I want to share not a screen, but a window. Okay. How many geniuses does it take to use Zoom?
Yeah, looks good.
Can you see it now, finally?
Yes.
Okay. What we did was we wrote a document a couple of years ago. John Levine was the primary author of it, and we wrote down what does it mean to support EAI. So we went through the RFCs, RFC 6530 through 6533, and we documented this is how it's different from normal email. And this is why, like, internationalized friendly names is not EAI, why, internationalized content in MIME is not EAI, how these things play, and stuff like that. So we wrote this document. Then John wrote a bunch of tests that we put out on GitHub. And between that document and these tests, we created a pretty comprehensive feature list. And then criteria for determining what level of support you actually have. So you can see what we have here is we've broken it down by the various components. The MUA, the MSA, the MTA. This is divided between standalone agents like Outlook for the desktop or webmail clients like gmail.com. If you're building your own system with a separate submission agent and a transfer agent, how do you figure that out? IMAP versus POP. So it's all split up over here. And then we even have a section for email utilities and tools, because an email system is not just sending and receiving email. That's a big part of it. It's not just hosting email services, although that's a great part of it. It's also things like managing address books or using MailChimp or something like that, mass mailers. So we've tried to accommodate all of those things in the self-certification guide. And so you can see we created 3 levels that we call platinum, gold, and silver. Silver is the most mundane, rock bottom level you can send to, you can receive from. Most systems have that. Then gold can do that, but it can do other things, like you can host within your service. And by host, I mean, right now I have an EAI address, but it's hosted by XGen because Microsoft doesn't offer hosting of it. We have a feature for that in Exchange server, but it's turned off by default. And within our own online service, we don't support it, right? So Microsoft products are silver, not gold. So we have a description of gold, and then we also have a system of platinum, which includes like aspirational things, like not only is it all the gold, but it supports all the best practices, which are documented in other place. Things are turned on by default. You have great documentation, et cetera, et cetera. So some of these things I think you can see are not automatable. How good is the documentation? Well, that's pretty subjective. But actually, a lot of email testing is not automatable. So that's a big challenge. You can see here, so we have like within the MUA, MUA1, EAI addresses can be saved to the address book. Okay, that's the first one. And then we have things going all the way down. Originator fields accept EAI addresses, unstructured header fields accept Unicode. Okay, so some of this stuff is pretty technical, but that's okay. So the audience here are the implementers, the developers, the service providers, people who can understand how an RFC works. Here's their checklist of what they need to achieve for each level of support. And this goes on, depending on whether you're a webmail service or your various components or something monolithic. There's a way that you can test it, and this goes all the way through this. It's very, very comprehensive, and it's been tested through a number of times. So THNIC in Thailand has tested it. There's a group in Sri Lanka that has tested it and provided a lot of feedback. And then there's other smaller groups. XGen in Rajasthan has tested it. So we know that this is comprehensive and clear, but we'd like to expand this more. And the idea is that building some sort of a marketplace around this would be a great goal. Now, another thing that we have going on, let's see if I can, okay. So hopefully you're seeing the wiki page again. We have this thing called the score generator. This is pretty remedial, but it's just every one of those requirements is listed in an Excel spreadsheet. You type in either a P for a pass or an F for a fail, and it assigns you the level of support you have for each of the components. So I don't know if you can see. Yeah, so there's a tab for MUA, a tab for IMAP, a tab for POP, and then everything gets pulled in on this top page over here, so you can see what level you've got. Now, unfortunately, the one that's on the wiki page is one that's sort of half filled out. That's because I don't control my own wiki page, which is a separate issue. It's actually a big issue. So going back to, let's just go back to this ICANN page. Where am I? There we go, the wiki page. We'd like to make a market, but we can't promote our champions because there's apparently a policy at ICANN about promoting one party over another party. I can't actually find the policymaker who can determine, what's allowed and what's not. So a lot of this seems to be hearsay. All I know is that, those of us who have worked within ICANN know very much that it's a conflict-averse organization with a very strong legal department. And so anything that's sort of slightly controversial, very, very difficult to do. So we don't actually have a rule book of what we as UASG are allowed to do. And so we just kind of push at it all the time and find out, until we get told no. One of the things we'd like to do is have a little bit more agility in how we at least control our communications. So the UASG.tech site, we know that that's run by org through Black Knight, I think, but I don't have direct access to Black Knight. So pretty much that's not editable by us. Supposedly this wiki will eventually become editable by me as the chair, but that's still undetermined. I noticed that Jonathan is saying in the chat that we as individuals, the volunteers who make up UASG, are not bound by these ICANN policies. And this is true. And that's pretty much the point that we're at right now, is that probably I will have to go and get a new domain name and set up a website, and it will be the place where all this EAI stuff goes, where people post their scores and people can use it. It can be the go-to place, or a variety of other things. One of the things that's actually difficult is if you go to what is it, server Stack Overflow or something like that. There's a lot of wrong answers. Developers ask questions, people answer them. There's a lot of wrong answers about how you do email. How you validate an email address and what does it mean to have a valid address. And a lot of it is wrong. And it's especially wrong for EAI. And it's kind of hard for us to overturn all those existing upvotes. But if we had a site like this that could say, these are the answers that are correct and these are the answers that are wrong, maybe that's the right approach. And that's pretty much where we're at right now, is we've been building all of this collateral and these resources, and we're getting people to use them. And we really want to go to the next step. And when you look at our consolidated 5-year action plan, a big part of it is building this program, going beyond just having a document and a self-certification guide and a scoring spreadsheet and stuff like that, and actually building this into a program with support and feedback in a community that can be used to build some sort of a mini marketplace. That's where we're at right now, and it's just hard. So that's what I've got going on. There's a lot of excitement around it. We have a very excited community. I'm here to take your suggestions about how we take this to the next level.
Mark, thank you very much. You brought us in ahead of time and with a very concise and interesting presentation, and you showed us some very important assets and materials, and hopefully we can figure out how to promote our champions without breaking too many rules. Maybe the champions can
well, as you say, if I
themselves.
host my own site, I'm not really breaking any rules.
Yes, that's right. Maybe we could at least create a gold, silver, platinum sticker system that they can put on their website.
Yeah, exactly.
Something along those lines. So Jonathan has had to take his leave because he's about to take his leave because he is about to get on the road from LA to Vegas, the classic mobster trip or Rat Pack trip. And we don't want him to be stuck in traffic. But see if anybody has any questions. We certainly have covered things in quite a lot of detail, even though this is the short version of a UA day. The long version is a day. But I think we managed in only 3 hours to exhaust both the subject and everybody listening to it.
Cool.
So if anybody wants to put their hand up and ask a question, if not, you can come over here to the Chrysler building and get a cookie. I can't guarantee they're going to be here after today, though. Probably should just get yourself a cookie wherever you are. Or you could get yourself a clear GIF or a web beacon instead of a cookie. In any case, universal acceptance is a continuing challenge, and it's certainly one that we need to kind of keep on the tail of those who actually control the assets that need to be compliant. We can speak all we want, but we're just barbarians at the gates. And ultimately, we need to find, business reasons for businesses to do this, and other reasons for others to do it. One other reason to promote universal acceptance is that we're going to keep having UA Day presentations until universal acceptance is done. So if you don't want to keep hearing these things every year, let's get universal acceptance accomplished. In any case, I want to thank all of our presenters, Naela, Sarras, Nabil Ben Yamal. Sorry, I just completely, mangled your name, Julian Bernard, Mark Sven Carrick, Jonathan Zook. Thank all of you who have, and Naela, yeah, I thought I said her first, but it's, one never knows. And thank all of you for sticking with this and being part of our audience. And I encourage each and every one of you to promote universal acceptance and to do what you can to make the internet a better place. So with that, I'm going, oh, and I would be totally remiss if I didn't thank Jolie McPhee. Jolie is the wizard behind the curtain, who is has all of the audio visual and technological bits under control, surrounded by boxes and screens and cables, and gave me this cute little microphone here on my pocket. As many of you know, Jolie is the lifeblood and the talking stick of ISOC and sometimes even ICANN. Promoting grassroots information sharing and keeping the lights on for so much content that we definitely thank Jolie for his work today and every day.
Don't mention it. What I will say to the presenters, though, is I would like to get your slides so I can add them to the archive. So if you forward them to Sylvia and she can get them to me, I shall put them in there.
Thank you very much. And now, without further ado, I will ask that the recording be stopped. Everyone can adjourn and go about your evening. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Recording
Thank you.
stopped.